Sometimes you die a hero or you live long enough to get to 50 episodes, baby. 1 year of this show. This has convinced me. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's here. It's finally here. Episode 50. The 1 year anniversary. This is Convince Me. I am Andy Rutherford, joined as always by Mr. Brian Bennett, joined vast majority of the time by Mr. Casey Elrod. Gentlemen, 1 freaking year.
Did you really believe that you'd make it 1 year without exiling me or blocking me or sending me out to pasture on this show?
No.
I had to talk him out of it a couple of times.
Yeah.
Just let you know.
I'm sure.
Yeah. I will say, I think
quite an accomplishment, I must say. You know, me being on the show a year, not the show lasting a year, but Rut putting that with me for a year. That's the bigger accomplishment that we get to tonight. I must
this is
say.
50 episodes more than I thought we would do.
That's the truth.
That is very true. But we're here 1 year. Thanks to you guys. Thanks for, because if we put this thing out and there were 0 listens, 0 views on our YouTube page, you know, we might not do this anymore. Granted, most of our episodes haven't been a lot more than 0, but they have been positive integers, and we thank you for that. And by the way, speaking of views on YouTube, I don't know why, I don't know how, I don't know what in the world is going on, but Mr. Bennett updated us over this weekend. We've got a video up to like nearly, well, it just surpassed, as we checked up beforehand, 10,000 views for one of our episodes. One we did months ago that didn't take off then.
Which one is it?
It's the Mike Tyson Muhammad Ali episode.
Mike Tyson's probably out there in Las Vegas watching it over and over and over again in his free time. That's probably what it is. Don't you think?
I don't get it.
Don't get it either.
Well, what we need is for people to start clicking on all these other ones, so we'll have all of them up to 10,000.
That's right.
Yeah, because if we get, you know, those big numbers, then YouTube will pay us to put ads in our stuff. And then we wouldn't like, you know, not lose money on the show like we have thus far. But that's okay, because this show is not about making money. This has been a year of a labor of love. We all thoroughly enjoy doing this show because, to be quite honest, we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't. It started out as, you've heard me say it 100 times, we were bored during quarantine, but started this for fun. 1 year later, we're still doing this for fun. And we thank you guys for tuning in. Before we get into the big 50th episode showdown where Elrod will die and will leave the show because he will be eviscerated so badly tonight.
Ooh,
Get into
Michael Keaton. Ooh.
Let's get in to our weekly shield and get that out of the way. Make sure you're following us on all of our social medias. We can be found on Facebook, facebook.com/convincemeshow. There is not a Facebook preview this week. We're having to record a day late. Weren't able to get a preview out there. To be quite honest, there's not going to be a whole lot more of those. So make sure you're following us over there to catch those, catch all the show announcements. Everything primarily is coming through our Facebook. We can also be found on Twitter at Convince Me Show. Occasionally we do polls. We let you guys pick the topics, and you can find those polls over on Twitter. So make sure you're following us there so you can kind of, you know, captain the ship on certain episodes. If you're going to follow us on Facebook, if you're going to follow us on Twitter, you might as well hop on the gram. Head over to Instagram. We are Convince Me Show over on Instagram as well. You can see all of Bennett's cool graphics over there. You can see them on the other sites too, but Instagram's for pictures. So if you're going to look at the pictures, go there to look at the pictures. Again, at Convince Me Show. And every single week, every single episode in its entirety in the video format can be found over on our newly popular YouTube page, tinyurl.com/convince me show. Go watch Ali versus Tyson. Everybody else is. You might as well jump on it. And while you're there, go watch all the other backlog. Every episode we've ever done is up over on YouTube, all 50 of them after tonight. Be sure to go check that out. And of course, we are a podcast. We drop every week, vast majority of the time on Wednesday mornings, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. If we are not where you listen to your favorite podcast, let us know, and we will do what we can to get there. Gentlemen, it's episode 50. It had to be a big one. It had to be a showdown. It had to be a slobber knocker. Copyright Jim Ross. For episode 50. And there's been, I believe it first came up, and I don't remember which episode it was. It was the Movie Mania Hodgepodge episode.
Mm-hmm.
Go check that one out in the archives. But there was one of those short little questions we do on our Hodgepodge episodes of who is the best Batman. And it got a little bit heated. And we said one day we're going to go back and do a full episode on this topic. And today is one day. This week is 1 week. It's the 1 year anniversary. It's episode 50. It's time to put the spotlight in the sky. It's time to determine who is the best Batman. Is it the originator, the man that took the franchise off of life support, Michael Keaton?
Or George Clooney.
Or is it, you killed my joke there, or is it Ben Affleck? No, or is it the leading man in the highest grossing films of the franchise, Christian Bale? And Mr. Bennett, you are our moderator, our referee, our separator for tonight. What are your thoughts going into it?
Moderator. That's all I know. No, I know. Okay, usually whenever I'm the moderator, I have no idea what y'all are talking about because I've never seen or heard or never seen the movie or heard of this or heard of that, what blah, 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 whatever. Batman, I know a thing or two about. So I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible and look strictly at the characters that play Batman, the actors that play Batman. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I was trying to think of a good way to come up with a coin toss that would be fair. And I think the fairest way to do it would be to talk about one of the films that got completely snubbed, and that's Batman Forever. Nobody wanted to do Val Kilmer.
I almost did Val Kilmer.
That probably would have been a win. We could have cut this episode really short.
I'll switch. I'll do Val Kilmer.
Y'all didn't. So, okay. I've got two different coin tosses. Which one do we want to do? Okay, we'll do this one. And if both of y'all get it, then I've got a tiebreaker. So, Batman Forever had some pretty big names in it. You know, like I said, I'd already touched on Val Kilmer. There's Jim Carrey, Nicole Kidman, Drew Barrymore, and a guy named Tommy Lee Jones who would play Two-Face. This is the first time we see Two-Face in Batman on the big screen, at least that I know of. So, in order for him to become Two-Face, he had to wear makeup. It isn't like today where it was all like CGI or this or that. He actually had to put on the full makeup for this. And without going over, I want to know how long it took him to get into character as Two-Face. And I'll make it easier on it. I want to know in hours how long it took. So it's at least 1 hour, but it's nothing crazy. It's not like 1 million hours or nothing like that. We'll go with closest without going over.
Okay.
If both of you go over, it'll just be closest. If both y'all guess the same number, I've got a backup.
I'm in for the win.
Elrod's in for the win. Are you in for the win? Like, was it the Freeze, Mr. Freeze?
Right. Let's kick some ice.
I'm glad we're not covering that one. 8 hours. 3 hours. The correct answer for Mr. Tommy Lee Jones to get into makeup of Two-Face was 4 hours.
Ooh.
Fun fact about that too, Tommy Lee Jones took on that role as Two-Face because for his son, it was his son's favorite character in the comic series. So he wanted to play that part. And then he went on to say that he greatly regretted playing that part, and it was one of the most embarrassing things he ever did. But that's beside the point. So, Mr. Rutt, I believe you were closest there. For opening statement, would you like to go first, or would you like to go second?
Michael Keaton came first. So I am going to not break the tradition of 50 episodes. I'm going second.
He had me on edge. Like, he's really going to do this.
Always keeping us guessing on the show.
That's right.
All right, then. Elrod, tell me a little bit about your opening statement for Christian Bale, then.
I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I have really looked forward to this episode tonight. For people that don't watch our YouTube show or listen to our podcast, a lot of these episodes, we're doing material that we really don't know about. But this one, me and Sir Rod have been debating this issue for a long, long time. I don't know what his obsession and his man crush is on Michael Keaton. I really don't get it. It might be the overrated Beetlejuice movie he was in. I really don't know. Michael Keaton is a good actor, not a great actor. I think that's the key. But let's talk about this. When you compare Michael Keaton's Batman to Christian Bale's Batman, you got to look at a few things. A thing I can illustrate what our argument is going to be tonight, Bennett, about Christian Bale. He's going to say, well, Heath Ledger. You see, if it wasn't for Heath Ledger, Christian Bale wouldn't be this great Batman. But I'm going to show you, if it wasn't for Jack Nicholson, the same thing could be said for Michael Keaton, his Batman too. If you look at the portrayal of Batman and how they were portrayed in the movies compared to how they were in the comics, the Christian Bale Batman, much more on par with the comics than the Michael Keaton Batman. We'll get into that. He's shaking his head, but it's true. We're going to talk about tonight how even Tim Burton talked about how the Christian Bale Batman was a great portrayal of Batman from the comic books. We're going to talk about how even the people that have played Batman, George Clooney, Ben Affleck, Val Kilmer, Keaton, Adam West, they all, not all of them, but the majority of them say Christian Bale is the best person that's ever played Batman. Even the own Batman say this. So if you don't take my word for it tonight, take the people that have put on the costume, that have been on the silver screen, and go with the obvious choice. And that choice, we won't talk about the voice tonight. I know it's going to, I know the ammunition's coming down the line about the voice. The voice aside, everything else screams Christian Bale, and we'll get into that later on.
I don't say this a whole lot, but Elrod's actually got some really good points. I'm curious to see how he executes some of these points, because I do agree with quite a bit of what you said about Christian Bale's version of Batman. So it's going to be interesting. Rut, tell me about Michael Keaton.
Well, Elrod, I could agree with you on everything you just said, but then we'd both be wrong. The only thing you said correct in your opening statement, even though you misspoke, was that Christian Bale had a perfect betrayal of the character of Batman. I believe you meant to say portrayal, but you said betrayal. Freudian slip, maybe. But anyway, I don't even remember what my argument was. First of all, way to piss off the moderator by slamming Beetlejuice right there in your opening statement. Know your audience, my friend.
Top 5 movies.
Know your audience. Here's the thing: the Batman series before 1989, the face of Batman was Adam West. This was as far as being on screen. It was very campy. It was very hokey, which for the time it came out, it was great. It was fantastic, but it was nothing like the comic character of Batman. And nobody wanted to touch this thing as a movie. When the movie got greenlit, nobody wanted Michael Keaton to be Batman because he's just a comedy guy. He's a comic. He doesn't fit Batman. But this franchise was on life support. Enter Tim Burton, enter Michael Keaton. Batman 1989 comes out and revives the entire franchise. We are sitting here having this argument this week because Michael Keaton, along with Tim Burton, as a team, saved the entire Batman franchise. And more importantly, look at what we see today. What are some of the greatest movies in the last 20 years? You look at the Christian Bale movies, which were great. I'm not going to slam Christian Bale very much tonight because I think he's the second best Batman. But Christian Bale, those movies were great. What has happened with the Marvel comic universe? Don't ask Elrod. Throwback on the show. But what has happened with those movies in the last decade? They've exploded. Guess what? The reason for all of that is Michael Keaton, because superhero movies were frowned on, they were poo-pooed on. Let's be honest, before 1989, superhero movies sucked, and nobody in Hollywood wanted anything to do with them until Tim Burton's Batman, portrayed by the man that I will be defending faithfully tonight and proving tonight is the best Batman, one Michael Keaton.
To be fair, Bennett, I knew the Marvel movies. It was everything else about Marvel I didn't know. So that was slander. That's slander in that opening statement.
You guys ever heard of Gambit?
If you've not heard, let me just say something now before we go any further. This is episode 50. This is the 1-year anniversary. This is a time to reminisce. Guys, if you are a new listener of this show, unless you're a Marvel fan, if you're a Marvel fan at all, don't listen to what I'm about to say. But go listen to our Marvel versus DC episode. The Academy Award for the absolute worst argument in the history of this show goes to Elrod's complete burial of Marvel Comics. It was awful, and if we were ever going to kick him off the show, it would have been then, but it was too darn entertaining. But speaking of too darn entertaining, I think this argument could very well head down that road. But before we do go down that road, we're going to take a short break for our podcast sponsor. For YouTube, you get the black screen for a half second, but whichever one it may be, we will be right back. And we are back. Mr. Bennett, where are we starting this war?
I think we should just start at the very beginning. And the very beginning, for what we're talking about, started in 1989. So I think, Rut, it'd be fitting if you kick us off and tell us about how Michael Keaton came to be known as Batman, and he would be the Batman for quite a while until 95. So tell me a little bit about how Keaton became Batman, kind of the events that led up to him being Batman. If he did anything before Batman, I can think of one thing that he did before Batman, but I'll let you take it away and tell me a little bit about Keaton here.
Well, this Batman movie had been something that was in the works for nearly 10 years by the time this thing came out. But again, like I said in my opening statement, nobody wanted to touch a superhero movie, and nobody wanted to touch the Batman franchise for a long time until they knew for sure they had a pretty good idea it was going to work. And I mean, talks for this movie started all the way back in 1980. Somewhere in the mid 80s, Tim Burton was pegged to be the director of this Batman movie, but the movie still was not greenlit by the studio until the release and success of Beetlejuice the year prior. So if Beetlejuice, it had Tim Burton and Michael Keaton's work in Beetlejuice not been such a success in 1988, we would have never gotten Batman in 1989. But because that was a big success and Tim Burton was already tied to this film, the studio went ahead and greenlit it. Fantastic. Now it's time to start casting. Now there were people involved with this movie that wanted A-list, top of the chain actors to play this role. Let me read you some of the names that some people wanted to play this Batman role. It's really a who's who of Hollywood stars, especially when we're looking at the late 80s. Mel Gibson, Kevin Costner, Charlie Sheen, Tom Selleck, Bill Murray, Harrison Ford, and Dennis Quaid were all names that the studio wanted to play Batman. The studio wanted top of the charts. Tim Burton wanted to cast somebody that had never been in a movie before. He wanted a complete unknown to come in and play Batman, so there was a little bit of pressure there. Finally, Tim Burton gives in and thinks, you know what, I'll get a big action star. He approaches Pierce Brosnan for the role of Batman, and Pierce Brosnan told him he wasn't playing a comic book movie. So there's this big who's going to play Batman, and one of the producers suggested Michael Keaton. Producer John Peters said that Michael Keaton had the right edgy, tormented quality of the comic book character of Batman to play the role. And Michael Keaton, having just been in Beetlejuice with Tim Burton loved Michael Keaton in Beetlejuice and wanted to work with him again. And Tim Burton was all about this idea. So Tim Burton pegs Michael Keaton to come in and play Batman. Higher ups in the studio weren't pleased. Michael Keaton was a stand-up comic. Michael Keaton was a guy that had been kind of put in this corner of comedy guy, funny guy. He had done several movies, several TV shows, but they were all comedies. They didn't think he could come in and play this serious role. But you know who is even more upset about the casting of him? Comic book fans were furious at the casting of Michael Keaton. As a matter of fact, Warner Brothers offices received 50,000 protest letters from comic book fans furious over the casting of Michael Keaton as Batman. But they would go on to change their minds, as a lot of people would, which we'll get into later. But the casting of Michael Keaton initially, not really a popular choice, but turned out to be the right one, as we'll get into.
You know, as much as I do love Michael Keaton as Batman, I do, a tiny portion of me wish that Dennis Quaid could have been Batman, just so we could have him like coming out of the Batcave and being like, Batcave school, you know, or something. I think that would have been an awesome scene.
Bennett wins the show.
If If you've seen any recent interviews with Dennis Quaid, I think he thinks he's Batman now.
Yeah, he's proud of himself.
Off the rails.
For sure. I'm gonna say something else too. About how everybody was up in arms about Batman, and Michael Keaton playing it. I think like that very first scene where he picks up the two guys there in the alleyway and just like destroys them. Everybody was kind of like, okay, all right, I will watch this and we'll see how it goes.
And it's so much different than today's world, because today everybody would be, I hate Michael Keaton. Warner Brothers is so stupid. And the Twitter warriors would come out. These people took time to write a letter, bought a stamp, put it in the mail, and sent it to Warner Brothers offices. You know how it doesn't take a lot of anger to do this. It takes a whole lot of anger to write a letter and send to an office. That's pretty pissed off.
You gotta be really pissed off to write a letter, and then you sit there and mumble all the way writing it. Then you have to seal it, and then back then too, you didn't have the little strips. They had to like lick it to seal it. Then they had to lick. They didn't have the stamps. You had to lick the stamp too. So now they're super pissed because now they had to lick the stamp, and the stamp tastes like crap. So then they're really pissed, putting it in the mailbox. So you got to be really pissed to go through that much trouble. Think how many other? There was probably more than 50,000. There was probably 100,000, but 50,000 of them got mad and just gave up halfway through. It's like, I'm not even doing this. So
there were at least 10,000 that wrote it but refused to lick the stamp.
That's right. That has to be a low number.
We are way off base. This is going to be good. All right, Elrod. Tell me about now. Full disclosure here about Christian. I didn't know a lot about him leading up to the Dark Knight trilogy. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about Christian Bale becoming Batman.
I think we had to understand the climate, like how the climate was in the late 80s and how the Batman climate was at the turn of the 20th century. So very similar spot, but a little bit different. Well, here's what I mean by that. From 89 to 2000, you had 4 Batman movies. You had the 2 that Rut's going to be talking about tonight. You had Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, Joel Schumacher films. If Batman was on life support in the late 80s, Batman was in a coma at the end of the 20th century because of what Batman and Robin did to the franchise. Batman and Robin is one of the worst superhero movies ever made. I don't think anyone's going to doubt that or argue against that. 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. Warner Brothers, even though it was a box office hit, it was a terrible blow to the franchise. So for 5 years, there's no Batman movies. Warner Brothers just shells it all. But they want to make a new Batman movie, and they want to reboot the entire idea. So they start looking for a director. And Christopher Nolan was the very first piece to this new Batman franchise. He had just had a film called Memento as a 2000 film that was a success. And they pegged him as the director. And they gave him complete control over who was going to play Batman. They just put it in his hands. And Rut talked about how it was a late 80s who's who of who's going to be this new Batman. It really was a who's who of who's going to be this new Batman in the 21st century. So here's some names that were considered. Henry Cavill, Hugh Darcy, Jake Gyllenhaal, of all people. And here is an interesting name. Heath Ledger was considered to be Batman. We'll talk more about his role in the franchise later on. But these were not huge names. These were not like these names were not like Mel Gibson in the late 80s. The franchise took a hit, as I said, with the Batman and Robin. They chose George Clooney. That was a disaster. So Christian Bale, a lot of people know him from American Psycho. He had been in another movie called The Machinist that's really good. So he chooses, Nolan chooses Christian Bale as Batman. And he chooses him for for some reasons, but some of his roles that he played had some Batman-esque qualities. The vengeful characters that he's played, the dark characters, and that's really the reason why Nolan chose Christian Bale to be Batman. But like I said, you have to understand why they didn't go after a top name just because Batman and Robin was such a failure. Batman Forever was somewhat successful, but like I said, Batman and Robin nuked the franchise. They wanted to go on it. They didn't want to go for the cartoon character movie that was portrayed. They wanted a darker, edgier, more realistic Batman. And they thought that Christian Bale would be the top villain for that, and he was. So that is how Christian Bale got the role.
I may be way off base here, but I think, when you look at Keaton being Batman, it was the late 80s, or very, very early 90s. And that was kind of the norm where you had the star-studded affair and all the stars just duked it out to get the role. And then you flash forward to like 2005, and it's not like that so much anymore. A lot of times, it's people that come out of nowhere, they become superstars on the big screen. So it's just kind of like, kind of the shifting of the times, really, when you think about it, how the two franchises differ. Okay, moving on. We've got Michael Keaton, we got Christian Bale. Now, obviously, these two highly successful Batman franchises, it's not just an hour and a half of these guys on the screen just twiddling their thumbs. There has to be some help for these guys. There's people that are supporting actors that may be villains, they may be associates or sidekicks or whatever. So, Elrod, start with me. Tell me a little bit about some of the co-stars that was also in the Dark Knight trilogy. Tell me about good guys, bad guys. Maybe a little bit about the plot, even for the people that lived under a rock and has no idea what we're talking about.
Well, if you've lived under a rock for the last 20 years, let me give you the Cliff Notes version of this. So, one thing he didn't have with all the other Batman movies before it was an origin story. And that was the first Batman movie. Batman Begins ponders the question, well, how does someone end up putting on a bad outfit and going around fighting crime? Like, what possesses a person to do that? And that's what the very first Batman movie in this trilogy does, Batman Begins. It goes back showing his training in Asia at a monastery with some shady folks, League of Shadows, Ra's al Ghul. The thing about the movies with Christopher Nolan was he wanted to have a story arc. He wanted all three movies to be connected. So that's what you get in the first movie, and that's what you get in the last movie too, The Dark Knight Rises. But in terms of co-stars, Christopher Nolan has a stable of actors that he uses a lot in other movies, not just the superhero movies. He likes to use Michael Caine. Michael Caine plays Alfred, that we all know, the butler for Batman. He uses Gary Oldman a lot, which he is Commissioner Gordon in all three films. Morgan Freeman, his character you don't see a lot in the other movies. Lucius Fox, he's like the creative mind behind all the toys that you see that Batman has, the Batmobile. Though that notion is not explored in the other Batman movies. Like, how does Batman get all these toys? We know he's rich, but how does he get that? That's Lucius Fox. Other characters, Liam Neeson playing Ra's al Ghul's assistant. He's the baddie in the first movie. The Batman Begins plot is simply this. It's an origin story that explores how Batman trained. He betrays those people. He doesn't like the idea of going around burning a bunch of cities down. They follow him back to Gotham, and they want to burn Gotham down. They want to make all the people in Gotham sick, and they want to make him crazy through the Scarecrow, another villain that you see in the movie. And that's and Batman wins, spoiler alert, and that's what tees up the Dark Knight. At the end of Batman Begins, you see Commissioner Gordon giving him a card. It says, you got to look into this guy. And it sets up the Joker, because the card is a Joker. And that sets up the next movie, which is strictly Batman fighting his chief rival, and that is the Joker. And Heath Ledger's portrayal of Batman is legendary. It's one of the best performances of all time, notwithstanding the fact that he died from everything that went into that role. A lot of people believe this role drove him crazy, drove him to drugs. We see Aaron Eckhart in this movie playing Two-Face, Maggie Gyllenhaal playing his love interest. So there's some big time after the first movie. You see a lot of star power wanting to join up. They sense that this is a great franchise, that this is a money-making venture. And that sets up the third movie. After he defeats the Joker, Batman takes the fall for killing Harvey Dent. So he's a wanted man. Harvey Dent is a savior of the city, but no one really knows that Harvey Dent was the bad guy who later became Two-Face. And that sets up the third movie, The Dark Knight Rises, who he fights another one of his classic villains, which is Bane, Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy, Heath Ledger gets a lot of praise for his portrayal of the Joker, but Tom Hardy did a really good portrayal of Bane. Very different from the Bane that you see in Batman and Robin. Very different. Same cast of characters in The Dark Knight Rises, plus you get Anne Hathaway as a Catwoman. I'm sure Rut will talk about his Catwoman tonight, and maybe a little bit, but I think we can both agree that Anne Hathaway's Catwoman much better than the one in Batman Returns. You don't think so? Okay. Well, we'll talk more about that later. But the thing I want you to focus in on, Bennett, is how each of these movies combined and they're connected. And that's what Christopher Nolan wanted to tell a story. And you really can't watch the third movie without seeing the first two. You got to watch them in order. You got to know the backstory. So those three movies are totally connected. And it's a very dark, it's a more comic book feel. It's realistic, a lot of sense, more so than the other Batman movies. So as you can see, it's a common core of actors, really good actors, and just a great story arc as well.
I'm gonna go ahead.
I thought of something while you were doing that I've never thought of before. You said Jake Gyllenhaal was one of the people originally considered this Batman.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if he'd got it and then his sister is his love interest?
Well, she was not the love interest in the first one. They changed Rachel's.
But he would have been. I guess that's true.
Yeah, they changed Rachel's. Contract dispute.
Ding, 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 ding.
All right, 2 points. Number one, I might be biased, but I think The Dark Knight is one of, if not the best, superhero comic book movie. Yeah, you want to call it. Even you can check Rotten Tomatoes; they agree as well. Number 2 point is we are in our second topic, and I'm proud of Elrod. You did a really good job with the summary of those three movies without spending 8 hours doing so. So don't let me down.
No, I actually know my stuff this time.
Yeah, this is great.
Before we go on, I want to ask a simple question, because this question is not really related to what we're discussing tonight, but it's got something to do with Heath Ledger. If Heath Ledger does not die, is his portrayal of the Joker still as iconic today as it is knowing that he passed away?
I think so.
He's pretty dang good in the role.
It was good. A lot of people, there's a segment of people out there that say, you know what, it's good, but he's only getting notoriety because he died as a result of this role. And I don't think that's right.
Yeah, I don't think you can make that as a factor. You can't really.
I mean, it might add to it a little bit, but dead or alive, that he was fantastic in that role.
Yeah.
I think that's
Better Joker, Nicholson or Ledger?
Ledger.
I agree.
There we go. See, I'm already winning.
They're not. This ain't who's the best Joker. This is who's the best Batman.
Tune in for episode 51. Who is the best Joker? No. All right. For Batman and Batman Returns, we've got Michael Keaton. Is there anybody else that decided that they wanted to hop on and play in these Batman movies, or was it just him and the two guys in the alley duking it out for an hour and a half?
I mean that would have probably been pretty cool. But no, there's over Keaton's two movies. It's a pretty star-studded lineup, and much like the Batman role of the first movie, the Joker role, there were a lot of names in play for that role as well. Names like Tim Curry, David Bowie, John Lithgow, Ray Liotta, and James Woods were all considered for the role of the Joker. As a matter of fact, John Lithgow, though, because there was still uncertainty about a superhero movie, John Lithgow, in his audition, went in to talk Tim Burton out of casting him. He went to the audition, but basically went to the audition to say, I don't want this. Please don't cast me. And he later has said that was one of the biggest mistakes he ever made in his career, because he didn't realize that this was going to be such a big deal. Somebody else that Lithgow really didn't want the part, somebody that really did want the part, Robin Williams really wanted the part of the Joker in the Batman movie. However, when the idea, the brainchild of this movie first came together back in 1980, the people putting this movie together had a top name on their list 9 years before this movie ever came out, and that name was Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson was approached about doing the movie in 1986. He was approached long before Michael Keaton, long before anybody. They wanted Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson got one of the best deals in history to do a movie, and that was this movie. He had what he called an off-the-clock agreement. He had certain hours of the day he could not work. He had days off on days of Laker home games, and he had it in his contract that every scene he filmed had to be done in a 3-week period. They had to do all his scenes in a 3-week period. Now, he also, as part of his deal, he was making $10 million a movie at this time. He decided to take $6 million instead and just take a cut of the profits, including the merchandising that came from this movie. It's estimated that came out to being between $50 and $60 million for Mr. Nicholson. So like I said, one of the best deals an actor has ever gotten for a movie. Also, as part of this deal, even before they knew who the Batman was going to be, Nicholson had it in his contract that he would be top billing on the movie. That's why if you look at the original movie poster for Batman, at the top it says Nicholson Keaton. Not because Nicholson was the bigger star of the movie, because that was in Jack Nicholson's contract that he get top billing. Interestingly enough. So the first movie, there's the plot, and I'm going to go way too long. So I'm just going to, Joker's the main antagonist here. Joker is working as a second in command kind of mobster who gets set up by the first in command, the top bad apple, and he ends up, Batman comes for the sting operation, and Jack Napier, who is Jack Nicholson's character, falls in this vat of acid chemicals. They think he's died, but he's not died. It bleaches his skin, it turns his hair green, he's disfigured, and then when he goes to get plastic surgery, he's left with this permanent smile. And that's where you get the look of the Joker. That's the storyline they went with. And so, of course, he, not dead, comes back, kills the guy that tries to have him killed, and then tries to take over Gotham, except this silly Batman is trying to stop him. There's a lot of, for the time, big name actors in this movie, but one I want to point out that's interesting. Harvey Dent is played in this movie by Billy D. Williams. Lando Calrissian became Harvey Dent with the intention, when Tim Burton casted Billy D. Williams, that when they did a second movie, he wanted Billy D. Williams to be the first Two-Face. He wanted the concept of an African American playing Two-Face. Only problem is Billy D. Williams opted out of doing the second movie. And they kind of just had to kibosh that plan. But that, to look back on, would have been very, very interesting. Skipping around to try to keep this brief, the second movie, your main antagonist is, of course, the Penguin, Danny DeVito. Also, some interesting names, some very interesting names up for this role. DeVito was turned on to this movie by his good friend Jack Nicholson, because Jack Nicholson told DeVito, hey, you want to know how much money I made doing the Batman movie? You should be the villain in the second one. That's how Danny DeVito got tied to the second movie. But some of the other people in consideration for that role, Dustin Hoffman, John Candy, Dean Martin, Alan Rickman, John Goodman, Phil Collins, Joe Pesci, Ray Liotta, and Christopher Lloyd. Doc Brown was considered to be Penguin at one point, but ultimately the role went to Danny DeVito. Another big name in this movie, that just an interesting fact, Christopher Walken is in this movie as Max Schreck, who is this wealthy businessman that is pushing for the Penguin character to become mayor just so he can kind of be his puppet and run the show. Tim Burton did not want to cast Christopher Walken. He was very, very hesitant to cast Christopher Walken because Christopher Walken scared him, legitimately. In real life, Christopher Walken scared Tim Burton, and he was hesitant to put him in this role. The last one I'll talk about, just to kind of go, just because Elrod brought it up earlier, Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. There was a lot of big names that were in consideration for that role as well. Susan Sarandon, Meryl Streep, Brooke Shields, Demi Moore, Nicole Kidman, Gina Davis, Madonna. There were a lot of people considered for this role. Michelle Pfeiffer gets it. And I had honestly forgot about this original Catwoman role. And as a matter of fact, had we recorded this show yesterday, I might have agreed with your statement, Elrod, just because it had been so long since I watched Batman Returns. But I watched it today in preparation for the show. When it comes to movies, especially superhero movies, there's good guy, there's bad guy. And Anne Hathaway's character was good guy. I mean, that's what she was. Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman may be one of the best, to use a wrestling term, tweener roles. Is she good? Is she bad? Back and forth. Don't know. She was fantastic as Catwoman, and I don't even necessarily know that that was all Michelle Pfeiffer. No disrespect to her. I think it was just the way that the character was written in and portrayed. But the character of Catwoman in Batman Returns was so much better than Anne Hathaway's version. And that's not take away anything from Anne Hathaway. She looked very good as Catwoman, and she did a serviceable job playing her. But the character of Catwoman in Batman Returns was just phenomenal.
Okay. 2 points. Number one, Danny DeVito as Penguin. There's nobody else that could be the Penguin other than DeVito. I think the Penguin's probably my favorite villain. And he said that Joe Pesci didn't get the part. So I think since he didn't get that part, he went broke, and that's why we see him breaking into houses in Home Alone, try to supplement some income for not getting the role.
Probably right.
It's probably true.
Number two,
Go ahead.
number two, so debate. It's the Catwoman is Michelle Pfeiffer for sure. It's not Halle Berry or Anne Hathaway. No, not at all. So we end that debate.
I do want to say, as far as the Penguin role goes, your tiebreaker coin flip question at the beginning, that's what I was thinking of, because I've done research today. You know, not Joe Pesci. Now you got me thinking. Danny DeVito in this role, he had a lot of makeup, a lot of, there was no CGI then. They had to mold everything. He had a face, not mask, but basically mask and all this stuff. His body was really like one of those German dolls inside a doll. It was shaped like that. It took him 4.5 hours every day to get into costume for this role. So that's why I thought the Two-Face role might not take as long. That's why my guess was 3 hours.
Interesting fact too about the Penguin. DeVito did say towards the very end there they were getting really good at the makeup, and they were able to shave it down to 3.
Yeah,
right towards the end. So I knew that. So where are we at? I know. Okay. Now, if it was up to me, I would say that Batman and Batman Returns, the two originals, and in my perception, were very, very good films. They were well written. They were, and for a lack of better word, they were pretty to look at. You could turn them on TV and they would keep you entertained. I know some of these other movies that I may or may not talk about, some of them are kind of slower, but not these. These jump right into the action. So my perception is that they were very successful films. But we're going to talk a little bit about the public perception. And Rudd, I'm going to start with you. What was the public's perception about Keaton as Batman?
When Keaton was cast as Batman, 50,000 people, as we discussed, wrote letters to Warner Brothers, said, "You're crazy, you're stupid, this guy's a comic. He don't want to be Batman. We don't want him as Batman. This is stupid." A lot of people either changed their minds, or there was a whole other side of this argument that came out once this movie hit theaters. This movie came out on June 23rd, 1989. June 22nd, 1989, there were select late night previews. We see that, well, we don't see anything in the movie theaters nowadays, but before the pandemic, big movie comes out the night before at midnight. I've sat in a theater at midnight to see the first showing of a movie. Maybe 9-10 o'clock. That is the first time. The night before the release date is the first time you can watch this movie. In a little over 1,200 screens, the original Batman movie grossed over 2.2 million the night before the release date. And it grossed 40.5 million during its opening weekend. It broke the opening weekend records that were held at the time by Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and then Ghostbusters 2. The film then went on to set a record for second weekend gross with $30 million, and was the second biggest 3-day weekend total for a movie of all time. And it was the fastest film in history to earn $100 million, reaching it in 11 days. And not even really a full 11 days, really 10 full days plus the preview the night before. It was what it took to reach $100 million. The film closed in December of 1989 with a final gross of $251.2 million in North America, $160.15 million internationally, totaling over $411 million, and it was the highest grossing film based on a comic book character, and it held that distinction for 20 years. Then it went on to make a further 150 million in home video sales. And if you will remember, home videos, when VHSs first came out in this late 80s, early 90s, do you remember how much a VHS tape costs back then when they first came out?
25 or 30 bucks, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what I think.
Sometimes a little more than that. They were not cheap, but this thing grossed 150 in home video sales. Box Office Mojo estimates that this movie sold more than 60 million tickets in theaters in the United States alone. So for a lot of people that did not like the casting of Keaton, they changed their mind, and most of them probably went back and saw it 2 or 3 times when you look at these numbers. Cinema Score gave it, an audience was polled and gave the film an average grade of an A on an A to an F scale. So this first one was a resounding public perception popular movie. The second movie then went on to set the record for highest opening weekend ever up to that point. So from a public perception of what the people thought about it, they thought it was a pretty dang good movie. And they thought Michael Keaton did also.
All right. Another 2 points real quick. Number one is I don't know who's the genius here, if it was the people behind the marketing of this movie, or if it was Tim Burton casting Michael Keaton that made this such a huge hit. Think about this. What if he cast Michael Keaton knowing that everybody's going to be up in arms and everybody's going to be like slightly confused. They don't know how to feel. Because, you know, if you cast one of these other guys that Rut talked about earlier, you know, they'll be like, okay, yeah, I might get around to catching that. But you put Michael Keaton in there and they're like, I've got to go see this because I don't know how this is going to come out. It's possible. Number two, you talk about home videos. I remember home videos. I think some of our younger audiences may not, but one of the very first films I remember watching was the original Batman, and that's really stuck with me. You know, how old am I? 30 years later, I still remember like that opening sequence where it's going around the bat emblem and then it pans out to show it. I was a little pup, maybe. I don't know if I saw that right when it came out on home video when I would be like 3 or 4, or if it was a little bit old, if it was a little bit older, maybe I was 5. But it's definitely one of the earliest films I remember watching at home. So that's crazy. Elrod, what about the public perception of Christian Bale's version of Batman?
Yeah. So you didn't have the same outrage when Christian Bale and Christopher Nolan came out with Batman Begins. And I think I alluded to this a little bit earlier. You didn't have that because I think a lot of, in the back of people's mind, especially people that love the comic books, love the Batman character, in the back of their mind, they're thinking, well, thank God this ain't George Clooney. Nothing could be worse than this. So anything would be a win. And that's what this was. So Batman Begins comes out in 2005. It doesn't open up nearly in terms of what it made at the box office, anything like the original 2 Burton films. Batman Begins opened up, it had a $150 million budget, which was still pretty large for a Warner Brothers superhero movie at the time. It did good at the domestic box office. It made $206 million. It made $167 million overseas. It was a decent financial success, but it was more so in terms of the movie review. It probably did better than the actual return at the box office did. People complimented Christian Bale, especially Christopher Nolan, on how the film looked. It was nominated for an Academy Award for just the sound and how the film was put together. And this was a totally different take on Batman. This isn't the goofy Jim Carrey Riddler. This isn't the just goofy Arnold Schwarzenegger Mr. Freeze. This is an actual dark character. So you're seeing him fight some very sinister forces with the League of Shadows. And one thing that this goes back to, Christopher Nolan, for his source material, used some Batman comic books that were not as popular back in the day. The Long Halloween, Year One, and The Man Who Follows were some short stories written about Batman a long time ago that were darker. So that right there was really the motivating point for him to have a totally different take on Batman. Now, if the first movie in the Dark Knight trilogy didn't make a lot of money, the second one broke the bank. And a lot of people went and saw the second movie because Heath Ledger passed away shortly before the movie was released. So that got a lot more people at the box office to go see the movie, and it shattered. It literally shattered the box office. It had a much higher budget at 185 million, but it made 535 million domestic, 469 million foreign, for a total of about $1 billion. It's still the 12th most movie at the box office of all time. The third movie in the trilogy didn't make nearly as much, just shy, but it didn't have the Heath Ledger storyline either. So I think that's the reason why it did not do nearly as good at the box office. But people, the take on Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale's Batman was simply this. People thought that Christian Bale was a good portrayal of the comic book Batman, but a lot of people did not like the voice. The voice, in terms of when he's Batman, it's very, very raspy. You do a better impression than I can, Bennett, of the Christian Bale Batman. I'm not going to try to do it, but a lot of people were like, "Well, why is he doing this? It's odd." But other than that, in terms of even the most hard and fast comic book Batman fanboys, really like Christian Bale's portrayal, and it got an A across the board in terms of the people Simmons score. It was a totally different portrayal of the Batman character.
Yeah, one of the things that they did with the Batman and the Dark Knight trilogy is they kind of revamped like his suit or his body armor, whatever you want to call it, and the way kind of a little bit the way he moved. I guess he could actually move his head now, his neck. He couldn't really do that so much. His mobility was a little bit more limited, unlike when Michael Keaton played the character.
One thing I will say that I omitted, and thank you for reminding me, Christian Bale showed up for his audition. He showed up in Val Kilmer's Batman outfit because it made him really mad, because Christian Bale was a big Batman fan. He said, "This is not Batman." That put him in this dark place, this mindset that made him do better in the audition.
Why didn't you like Val Kilmer as Batman?
He liked Val Kilmer. He didn't like the bat suit. He thought that the Batman was supposed to be agile. He's supposed to move around. The Val Kilmer one did not do that.
To be fair, they screwed up with the Val Kilmer outfit to begin with because they put nipples on it.
They did.
They did. That was really weird.
Batman doesn't have nipples. Bats don't have nipples. I don't know if that's true or not. But Batman does not have nipples.
It was the 90s. It was a very strange time. We'll just chalk it up as that. All right, I'm gonna keep with you, and I may be throwing you up an alley-oop here.
Yeah.
But we talked about the public perception. Now, let's kind of keep on that same wavelength, but talk a little bit more about the critical perception of this? What do the critics think about even the movies, but more so Christian Bale's performance?
Well, I'll start off with the low hanging fruit, and that is second movie in the trilogy, The Dark Knight, and how that's portrayed. Now, yeah, you said this earlier, Ben. It's regarded as one of the not just the best superhero films of all time, but one of the best films of all time. That people put these lists together. It has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. A lot of this is more Heath Ledger praise, more so than Christian Bale. But just the storyline and the way it's a second ring in this arc, but it kind of connects the first film and the third film with Harvey Dent. Roger Ebert, who does not give out 4 stars very much, gave this movie 4 stars. And it talks about how the movie becomes an engrossing tragedy. It's a very dark movie. Batman loses his love interest. Harvey Dent, the Gotham's beloved DA, turns into Harvey Two-Face before our very eyes. You see the Joker and all of his ilk. Everything about this movie just screams dark. And maybe critics love darker movies more so than happy movies. But The Dark Knight, it still to this day is regarded, it's on Empire's 15th. Empire magazine says that this is the 15th greatest film in history. That's hard to do. If you look at superhero movies, for a superhero movie to be that high on the list, it's saying something. But if you take this movie out of the equation and just look at the first one, Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises, the critics have a favorable opinion of these movies as well. If you look at Rotten Tomatoes, Dark Knight Rises has a little bit less than The Dark Knight, has 87% rather than the 94%, and Batman Begins has 84%. And all these movies have a cinema score of an A rating. So this was not a trilogy that had one bad movie. Each movie was regarded by both the public and the critics as a solid film. And as I just said, the second movie, The Dark Knight, is one of the greatest movies of all time. And Christian Bale's performance as Batman and Bruce Wayne have a lot to do with the high ratings, because it was just so fresh. It still is to this day. It was a realistic take on the character. Batman, he wasn't the goofy one you saw in the Batman Forever movie, or even more so Batman and Robin. A believable character. I'll talk more about this in a minute. When Christopher Nolan hung it up, Warner Brothers still wanted to make Batman movies with Christian Bale. And you're not going to believe this. I'll talk more about this later on. You will not believe the offer that they gave Christian Bale to be the Batman that's being portrayed by Ben Affleck right now. The offer that they gave him, that I still can't believe to this day he turned down.
Okay. Would the offer be more or less than the offer that the late Bud Adams gave to Peyton Manning?
It would be more.
It would be more. That's hard to believe, but I'll believe you. I was going to say something. I think Rotten Tomatoes, I think they got it right. Of course, Dark Knight, beat the dead horse about it being one of the best ever. And then Dark Knight Rises right behind it was still I think that one doesn't get quite the credit it deserves. I think that was just as good of a film with what they did with Bane and that whole thing.
I won't cut you off, but you talked about The Dark Knight Rises. Christopher Nolan had an idea of how he wanted to end the trilogy. He wanted to kill Batman, but there is only one entity that you can talk to when you want to kill Batman, and that's Hasbro, because they make the toys. He had to get permission from Hasbro to kill Batman, and Warner Brothers blessing as well, because of killing Batman. That might hurt the toy market a little bit. But even though Batman was killed, Bruce, so it's kind of a compromise that was struck. You can kill the Batman, but Bruce Wayne lives. Spoiler alert.
Interestingly enough, about you bringing up the toy line, I don't know how much of this is true or how much of this is a rumor, but from what I've gathered, is pretty much the major flop that was Batman and Robin. That was more of a money grab for the toy line. They just had to have something on the screen, like, oh, okay, yeah, here's your Poison Ivy figure. Here she is on the screen. Here's Bane. So you need to go buy the figure. I'd always heard that was kind of more for the toy line and the merchandise than the film. I don't know how much of that's true though.
Before Rut goes on his spiel, did either of you did you collect the Taco Bell cups for Batman and Robin, the Mr. Freeze, the Poison Ivy, the Batman, the Robin? Please tell me you did. I still have those somewhere.
I feel like I may have, because I was really, really deep into Batman then. I do remember having all the toys at that time. I'm sure I might. If I had the cups, it's something that I may have had and got rid of. I'll ask my parents if they remember the cups.
I'll never forget seeing Uma Thurman as a 7-year-old in that cup, thinking, "Oh my god."
Knowing Bennett like I do, I can almost guarantee he collected those cups, because he said that was pretty big into Batman at the time, and he's been pretty big into Taco Bell his entire life. So I can almost guarantee he has those cups. Another thing, I think Dark Knight Rises is a little bit overlooked. I think it's because it made everybody in Baltimore and Cleveland and Cincinnati mad that Hines Ward did not fall in the big hole when the football stadium exploded, and he actually scored the touchdown and didn't fall in the hole. So those 3 cities automatically said, I'm not watching this crap. Just
I think so.
Just a guess.
It's very possible. All right, Rut, tell me about Keaton and the Batman movies. What did the critics think about it? Were they on board with the public? Were they completely opposite than the public was on this?
When you look at it from just a score perspective, then yes, the Christopher Nolan series was higher scored. When you look at Rotten Tomatoes, the first Batman got a 71 from the critics, got an 84 from the public, but a 71 from critics. Batman Returns got an 80 from critics. But you got to look at what some of the biggest knocks on the movie were when you go back and read some of these reviews. Critics were obviously different in 1989 and 1992 than they were in 2008, because their big knock on it was it's too dark. It's too gloomy for a superhero movie. It's too dark and gloomy. And they chalked that up as a bad thing and held it against it. Whereas fast forward, 25 years or 15 years, and the Dark Knight trilogy, oh, it's so dark, it's so gloomy, that makes it great. So when you look at it, that's kind of strange, but you got to remember the state of superhero movies in 1989. They sucked. They really did. And this was a massively high score for a superhero movie at that time. But there was also the perception that these superhero movies are supposed to be campy. They're supposed to be kind of over the top and cheery, and the good guy wins all the time. And maybe when they thought of Batman, they had the Adam West boom, pow, pop in their mind. And then when this comes out, it's like, well, this is kind of dark. This is kind of deep. This is not what a superhero movie is supposed to be. That was the biggest knocks on this when it first came out. But critics, that's what they said about the first movie. They said that a lot about the second movie, though. But I honestly think when you look at the 2 movies, the first one is iconic to me and will probably always be. When I think Batman, I think of that 1989, but I go back and watch them today. And when you look at plot lines, you look at the way the story evolves, you look at the characters, Batman Returns was probably a better movie than Batman was when you look at it. And it was very, very good. Critics loved it. To give a superhero movie a score of 80 in 1992, 1993 was astronomical. And I think what this did, it changed the way people looked, especially critics, at superhero movies, to make them more open to the Christopher Nolan series that came out of these movies. Now, I'm not saying, oh, the Christopher Nolan movies suck. No, they're fantastic. They're great. I love them. Critics loved them, as they should have. But I do think that critics looked at these original two through a much different lens than they looked at the Christian Bale trilogy. Plus, the Christian Bale trilogy was coming out. The Batman, when Michael Keaton started, when Tim Burton took over, was coming from nothing, and it was, we don't know what superhero movie can be. The Christopher Nolan Christian Bale series was coming off of Batman and Robin, where we do know what superhero movies can be. We know how awful they are, and holy cow, this is 1,000,000 times better than this. Throw it all the money, throw it all the praise. This didn't suck like that thing did. But in all seriousness, I do think critics were looking at it through a different lens and were more receptive to a dark, gloomy type of superhero movie.
Elrod, I got one question that I meant to ask you earlier too. The magazine that you said had The Dark Knight as number 15. Was it Empire?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I want to check their credibility. Where do they have Forrest Gump? If they don't have them number
I will
one,
get back to you on that.
if they
Probably number
I'll let you look. If they do not have Forrest Gump at number one, we're throwing them out for non-credibility.
You had to get it in this week. You didn't get it in last week.
I didn't. I did this time. While you're doing that, I'm going to jump to Rut then. This is our kind of our last topic. I think I may have some questions. I don't know. Maybe I've wrote some stuff down. But before that, let's talk a little bit about the legacy of Michael Keaton and what he means to Batman, what he means to the whole Batman franchise, what his character brings to the table for Batman.
Michael Keaton, as I stated earlier, brought this character and this franchise back from the dead. It brought what this character was supposed to be to the big screen. It wasn't your typical superhero movie. It wasn't the campy Adam West, bang, boom, pow. This was what the character was, and he brought it to the screen like nobody else ever did. He saved this franchise. He and Tim Burton saved this franchise that made it possible for Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale to break, and Heath Ledger to break all these records, to make all this money. It would not have been possible without Michael Keaton. Now, actually, I'll save that for my closing arguments, but I will say that Michael Keaton's as Batman, especially as Bruce Wayne, has stayed with people. And I don't think anybody will deny that The Dark Knight is the best Batman movie ever made. I'll agree to that sitting right here. And I love all of these movies. I'll agree with that. When you look at who is in the best movies, okay, it's Christian Bale, but we're not talking about who is in the best movies. This isn't Tim Burton versus Christopher Nolan. This isn't 1989 versus 2008. This is who is the best Batman. And if you look at sources, we look at polls all the time on the show, and you can find 8 million polls. And if you look hard enough, you could probably find a poll that says whatever you want it to say. But so when you look at polls for things like this, you have to look at your credible sources. And when you look at your credible sources like Insider, like Esquire, like USA Today, like Empire Magazine that Mr. Elrod quoted earlier, when you look at all those sources, every single one of them agree with me that the best Batman ever was Michael Keaton. He was not in the best Batman movies, but he was the best Batman. He brought a public perception to Batman of this is not Adam West. This is not 60s television. This is the comic book character of Batman coming to your screen. He's not necessarily the clean cut, always good guy. That's not who Batman is. Keaton was the first to bring that to your screen. And what Keaton did better than anybody else, including Christian Bale, was the differentiation of Batman and Bruce Wayne and how they were the same, yet they were also different, because there was something when you look at Batman, his parents, the story in basically every version of Batman, his parents were killed right in front of him when he was a kid. That's what spawned him, that gave him the psychological issues he had, that spawned him into becoming this Caped Crusader, this vigilante of taking out criminals. And there's that difference there where he switches from Bruce Wayne to Batman. And Michael Keaton did that better than anybody else. Christian Bale did it very well. Others have done it very well. Some have done it very not so well. But Michael Keaton did it first. And Michael Keaton did it best. And his legacy of his portrayal of this Batman character, he set the bar way, 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 way high. And Val Kilmer, who I didn't hate as Batman, didn't get close to that bar. George Clooney didn't get close to that bar. Ben Affleck, who did better than anybody thought he would be as Batman, didn't get close to that bar. The only person that's gotten close to that bar is Christian Bale. But did Christian Bale make it to that bar? I say no. Empire Magazine, Insider, Esquire, and USA Today say no, because the legacy of Michael Keaton is he brought this character to the screen, did it right, and set the bar so high doing it that a lot of people would agree nobody else has touched it.
Is that your legacy, or is that your closing argument?
Yeah, I think he's done.
That's a legacy. He brought it back from the dead and set the bar to where nobody else could do it. His legacy is he's the best Batman.
Elrod, do we have an update on Forrest Gump?
61.
61?
61. Does that shock you?
Did you say 6 through 1?
Yes, 6 through 1.
All right. Now I'm going to write an angry letter.
You should. And you got
to put a stamp on it and put that thing in the mail in the morning.
If you're really mad, you'll lick the stamp.
Ooh, I don't have those. I've just got the peel and sticks.
Lick the peel and stick.
I think I will. I'm that man. Okay, so while I'm thinking about what I'm going to write in my letter to Empire Magazine, tell me a little bit about Christian Bale's legacy as Batman.
All right. I'll keep this short and sweet. Story time here on Convince Me. I just heard a very, very good closing argument from Rut on why Michael Keaton's better. But I want to tell you a story on why I win right now. It has to do with money. So it's got to do with Marvel too. Marvel, with their new Avengers movies, with all this, was making a lot of money, making DC Comics, making Warner Brothers look really bad. Disney was owning the market. So they wanted to do the Justice League to compete with the Avengers. This was on the heels of The Dark Knight Rises. Christopher Nolan bowed out in terms of his involvement with Batman. He says, I'm done. I've completed my story. I've done the 3 movies. I'm done. Well, on the same token, Christian Bale's done with Batman as well. I'm done. But this is where the story gets good. But Justice League, you got to have a Batman. So Warner Brothers says, you know what? We just made the Superman movie. We want to have the Dawn of Justice. So what they do? Did they approach Michael Keaton with a Brinks truck full of money to be this Batman? They did not. They had a choice that they could have went to him, but they don't. Instead, they go to Christian Bale and make one last attempt at bringing him back in the suit. And what they did was they tell Christian Bale, we understand that you are done with this character, but we want to bring you back. But you only have to be in the movie 10 minutes. We just want to bring your Batman and bring it canon for the new franchise. And they say $30 million for 10 minutes. And we want your Batman to be it. Not anybody else. Not George Clooney, not Val Kilmer, and not Michael Keaton. And a man of his word, he told Warner Brothers to get out, that he didn't want their money, that he was done with that role. That's pretty powerful. If you have Warner Brothers, more money than God, they could have had their pick of who they wanted to lead the DC franchise forward with Batman. They chose, Ben Affleck after Christian Bale turned him down. But that just shows you if you think that Christian Bale was just a victim of circumstance in him being in good movies, it's not that, because they wanted his Batman to be the star face of their franchise going forward.
What year was this?
This was in 2013, I want to say 2014.
2004. We'll say 2013. 8 years ago. Michael Keaton was 62 years old.
But if he's so good, why is he not the face?
Because he's 62 years old. They're not going to go to Christian Bale with $30 million when he's 60 years old. So he Harvey did. Can we trust him? No, that's a terrible argument. He's 60 freaking years old then. No, they're not going to go to him.
There is some talk now that Nolan wants to go back with a fourth movie. And there's some preliminary talks in bringing Bale back, but Bale wants to come back on The Flash and making it. But there's also some talk of bringing Michael Keaton. So there may be a similar thing in bringing all of them back on The Flash, which would be kind of cool.
Keaton is confirmed for Flash.
So he's coming. So but they're in talks with Bale as well. That'd be kind of cool to see both of them on the same show.
The 70-now-year-old Michael Keaton is on the club.
Just waiting for Beetlejuice too.
They won't.
Jeez.
All right. Elrod, I'm gonna start with you first.
Okay.
All right. So, here's my question. When it comes to, hang on with me too. Just bear with me. When it comes to the Batman movies with Michael Keaton in it, you know, you've got some good villains. You know, you've got the Joker, the Penguin. There's Catwoman. There's a few others, but those are the main ones. So, did I say the Penguin? The Penguin. Mm-hmm. Anywho, obviously, with these great actors and actresses that are with him, it's obvious that Michael Keaton and his Batman is like the main guy through both films that he's in. But when we talk about the Dark Knight trilogy, and then we talk about the movie The Dark Knight, who's the main star of this trilogy? Is it Christian Bale? Is it Christopher Nolan? Or is it Heath Ledger and his role in Joker? You know, who is the star of the franchise?
The star of the franchise is Christian Bale, but at the heart of it, it's kind of like it's a Christopher Nolan construction, but you've got at the heart of it, it's always a Batman movie. but you just got some great supporting characters in these films. I mean, the star power, these are not just flop actors. I mean, these are some of the best actors in the history of Hollywood. Michael Caine, Liam Neeson, Morgan Freeman. We've just never seen Batman with the firepower. We've seen him with one or two other supporting characters, but we've never seen like a full cast of all these stars in a Batman film, and that was the first time we've seen that with a darker edge. So the main character in each of these films is clearly Christian Bale, but you've got these other flavors that are present as well.
Okay, that's fair. Rut, kind of a similar question, but not really. It's a compare and contrast with Christian Bale's Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy. It's like something that Elrod said in his opening statement. He's true to the comics, and Christopher Nolan kind of keeps the Batman character very true to the comics, and Tim Burton kind of steers away from that a little bit. And if you know anything about Batman, you know he has like a no-kill policy. You know, he does justice, but he doesn't kill people. And in the first two movies, I mean, you can pretty much put two and two together, and there's a few times where he kills people, and maybe not outright, but, you know, people do get wasted. Do you think Batman in these first two films, killing people, if you will, in a way, does that take away from Batman's authenticity in for Michael Keaton's role?
I don't, and here's why. Tim Burton did go away from the comics in a lot of ways. Yes, Batman killed Joker at the end of the first Batman movie. Batman doesn't kill anybody, especially not Joker. Why do you kill off your best villain so you can't bring him back anymore? Not that they ever planned to bring him back for a second movie, but yeah, he killed him there. Another big thing, they had Joker was revealed in the first one to have killed Batman's parents, which was not the case in any of the comics, and a lot of comic book fans were pissed off by that decision to have that in there. And there was kind of that feel-good story of this came full circle because Joker killed his parents, so he killed Joker. Everything's full circle. Batman's got some sort of relief here, but that was a lot of the agony of Batman in the comics. The guy, I think it was it Joe Chill? Is that the character that killed his parents in the comics? That guy died before Batman could ever get to him, so he never has that closure in the comics, and that's part of his adds to his psychological torment there. So yes, this went away from the comics. No, I don't think it takes away from Michael Keaton's character, in the sense that that's more on the writing. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm making a point for Elrod here, and he didn't say this, so I'm going to disagree with him, but agree with him at the same time. Dark Knight Rises is great. It's a Batman movie. It goes with this Batman story. That particular chapter of the story, the stars are Joker and Harvey Dent. Batman's kind of a very, very important supporting role in that movie. Now, in the story as a whole, yes, it's a Batman thing, but I bring that up to say that that's not Christian Bale's fault. What happened in the first one's not Michael Keaton's fault. That's writing, that's director's choices. That's what that is. So if that hurt the Batman character at all, it's Tim Burton hurting the character. I feel like I've gone way, way around this answer. But no, I don't think it hurt the character. I don't think it hurt Michael Keaton's role and Michael Keaton's perception as the character.
I think Tim Burton didn't know a whole lot about the comics, so he just said, you know what, this is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So that's how it's going to be. All right. Closing arguments. I expect these to be really good. These are probably going to hinge my decision. We'll see. Rut won coin toss, so Elrod will go first. Closing argument. Tell me why Christian Bale wins.
Elrod, you're on mute.
This is a very close argument. Here's what you got to look at. Look at, I know that we're not talking about the movies. We're not comparing the movies. We're comparing the actors. But if you take the Christian Bale Batman and put him in that original movie, and you take the Michael Keaton Batman and you put him in the other movies, you're not going to get the same feel. You're just not. You're not going to have the same Batman. You've got to look at the awards these movies have won. You've got to look at the story that I just told about how Warner Brothers had their choice of who they wanted. I know that Keaton was older at this time, but I mean, Keaton is a very fit man, even for 70 right now. He could have been the focal star at 62. Let's be honest. He was just in one of the Spider-Man movies as the lead villain, and he's about to be brought back. So that argument is invalid.
No, it's not.
They had their choice. They did not choose Michael Keaton. They could have chose Christian Bale. Christian Bale turned him down, and he told them to take their Brinks truck and go back home with all their money. Christian Bale, his Batman and Michael Keaton's Batman both did the same thing. They both saved the franchise. If Christian Bale's or if Michael Keaton's Batman saved comic book franchise movies back in the 80s, after the damage that was done with Batman and Robin, Christian Bale and Christopher Nolan saved the Batman character for this century too. It's a more realistic take on the character. It's more true to the comic books. When you take everything and consider everything, I think you got to look at it. It's a close argument, but look at the success of the movies. Look at how the character is portrayed. Is it true to the comic books? Now, I don't think there's any choice or any decision other than saying that Bale is better than Keaton.
All right. Rhett, bring us home. Close us out.
Two things here that I want to take away from his closing arguments. You talk about, Michael Keaton could have done it at 60-something years old, played this awesome vigilante. Well, let me ask you this, Elrod. Is Ben Affleck a better Batman than Michael Keaton?
No.
Well, then when Christian Bale turned down that money, why didn't they go to Michael Keaton after that? If Michael Keaton being 63, he could still do it. Why did they go to Affleck?
Maybe to ask him. Maybe they thought he was going to be a better Batman. He ended up not being a better Batman. So that's just their loss. Or
maybe Michael Keaton was in his freaking 60s, and to be this butt-kicking vigilante, he's a little too old for that role to take that out of. Second of all, you said all these awards Christian Bale's won. What awards did he win for Batman? What awards did he win for Batman?
That he won personally?
Yeah, personally.
He did not win Best Actor.
Yeah. What else did he win?
Like, he got some notoriety, but he didn't win any Academy or Golden Globes.
Okay. Well, so then you can't say, well, Bale with his awards, yada, yada, yada. He won none for what he did in the movies. Should he have? Maybe. Keaton probably should have too, but those roles don't go to superhero movies. But you can't throw that out there as, he won these awards. Here's the thing. When you look at the character of Batman, it's the dichotomy of Batman and Bruce Wayne. And when we really look at that, here's the thing. Christian Bale played a great Batman. Christian Bale was boring and borderline sucked when it came to playing Bruce Wayne. Michael Keaton, this wouldn't even be an argument. If this was the argument, Michael Keaton has been the best Bruce Wayne of any of these characters who have played Batman. He had that quirkiness, that billionaire that didn't really seem like he was comfortable being a billionaire. He had his funny quips. He was kind of a funny guy. He was a human being. He was nice. Christian Bale was stoic and stale, and a lot of times Batman without the suit and the voice when he was playing Bruce Wayne. And that has to be taken into consideration because Bruce Wayne is Batman, and the dichotomy between the two is a lot of who's Batman. Now let's put the suit on them. Christian Bale was a great Batman. Michael Keaton was a great Batman. What bad things can you say about Michael Keaton as Batman? Not a whole lot. A lot of people were upset that he didn't have the body that you would think of as a superhero, but he had on the big bodysuit. He's a rich guy. He's, Iron Man in a sense of he can buy this body armor that makes him look like he's ripped and doesn't have nipples because that's how Batman's supposed to be. What can you say about Christian Bale that's bad as Batman? Not a lot, but there is one thing. The voice is so hokey and campy and weird. Michael Keaton, yeah, you got to change your voice, but he had this whisper, the first line, I'm Batman. But it wasn't in this weird voice. And then you've got Christian Bale, Harvey Dent, can we trust him? And I can't even do it well, but neither could he. It was strange. And I don't want to take away. Christian Bale was a great, great Batman, but there is a flaw there. The voice is distracting to a lot of people. There's one flaw I can find in Christian Bale's Batman. One flaw. But that's one more than I can find in Michael Keaton. And when it comes to who's a better Bruce Wayne, that's not even an argument. That's 1,000 times Michael Keaton. And that dichotomy is what makes Batman. So when you look at that logic, when you look at the fact, yes, they both saved their franchise. Michael Keaton saved it from obscurity. Christian Bale saved it from George Clooney. But when you look at it like that, when you really break it down, they're both great. I don't think anybody would argue when it comes to live action actors of Batman. They're 1 and 2 on any credible list you look at. And they're 1 and 2 on my list. And they're probably 1 and 2 on Elrod's list. And they're probably 1 and 2 on your list, Bennett. And they're probably 1 and 2 on everybody listening / watching this list. There's one flaw in Christian Bale. No flaws in Michael Keaton. And Michael Keaton was 1,000 times better Bruce Wayne. So he's the better Batman.
Okay, so I've got a few observations here on these two guys. I'll start with Keaton. It's obviously he did revive the Batman franchise, and he set the standard for what we perceived Batman as to be. Like I said, he was the comedy guy, and people were really upset about it. Critics and audiences both, were up in arms about it. They said, he shouldn't be Batman. Look at all the people that they had lined up that wanted to be this Batman character. So he proved all them wrong, and turned out to be a huge, massive hit. Interestingly enough, when I look at Michael Keaton's character, it's more about Keaton being the Batman character and his struggles with being the billionaire Bruce Wayne character. When I look at the Christian Bale, it's more about Christian Bale being the Bruce Wayne character and his struggles being the Batman character. Notice I'll go on to Christian Bale then. Like, he was in the 3 films where Keaton was only in the 2, but granted, Keaton was only in 2. He was going to be in the 3rd. He read the script, and I think he legit said, "This sucks." So he didn't do it. So they had to get Val Kilmer there. But if we're looking at the films, by far, Christian Bale's character, for money wise, is the most successful. Critic wise, most successful. Public perception wise, that one's a lot closer. It really depends on the person which one they think is more successful there. By far, I think the Christian Bale Batman character is more authentic to the comics, and As far as the actual get up of the Batman, like his suit, his armor, his mobility, I do think the Christian Bale character is a better Batman, other than the voice. Right, you said that the Michael Keaton character Batman doesn't have any flaws. I think his only flaw is, he couldn't really move his neck for 2 movies. He had to like move his body, and like his mobility was a little bit less than you'd want to see a Caped Crusader be. So I think they actually really refined it a lot with the Christian Bale character. As far as the plot goes, that's also Christian Bale. The storyline in it is fantastic. For the whole series, the whole franchise, it's a better, complete story. But it's like you said, we're not really talking about the franchise as the movies. We're talking about the character, and sometimes it gets hard to separate the actual character from the movie. But the 1 or 2 questions that I keep thinking about the whole time that you guys were making y'all's points, and both y'all have very good points. This was a very well presented case on both sides. First question is for Michael Keaton is, do we have Batman today in 2021 if Michael Keaton and Tim Burton, if they completely drop the ball? Do we have Batman movies? Maybe we had like a random one, or maybe we still had the animated series that came on. So maybe we have the Legos movie. We didn't talk about the Legos movie. That gets a pretty decent score on Rotten Tomatoes, I think. I'm not going to look it up, but I think it got pretty decent scores. The big question, though, is you talk about Val Kilmer, and then we talked about George Clooney. We talked about Ben Affleck. We didn't talk about, what's his name? The guy that's the vampire, Robert Pattinson. He's gonna be Batman. You talk about I can't remember their names, but there's a couple of guys that voice Batman on the animated series.
Conway, some Kevin Conway is his name.
Kevin
done it for years, something like that.
Yeah, and that animated series is actually a very, very critically acclaimed animated series.
And going back,
one thing that's in Adam West too. Adam West was Batman. He was the OG Batman, I believe. And there was a couple other guys that have done Batman over the years. But the one thing that, at least, and I might be completely off here, but at least for me, and I'm somewhat of a Batman connoisseur, is anytime that somebody plays a role of Batman, in my mind, they always get compared to Michael Keaton. They always, you look at all these other guys that have played Batman after Keaton, and you think, okay, well, how does this Batman compare to the Batman that I remember in 1989? So I look at it just strictly on the character and the person that perceives it, or that the person that played it. There was one guy that gave the direction, gave the blueprint, gave us the standard, and that's Michael Keaton. So my choice and it's close, it really is, but my choice for the best person so far to play Batman has been Michael Keaton.
I can live with that.
So, Rut, you convinced me, but man, you guys, well done on both ends. I actually agreed with a whole lot of stuff that Elrod said. So you did Batman well.
Here we go.
Elrod, first of all, DC fans love you a whole lot more than Marvel fans do after tonight. You did a great job up until
Anne Hathaway. That's where you lost me.
Yeah. You trailed off with Anne Hathaway. I could have forgiven you for that one. When you said that, they obviously, the whole thing with a 65-year-old Michael Keaton's really what just buried you with me. Well, Michael Keaton must suck. No, he's just old. Father Time does no jobs. But no, Elrod, valiant effort. But what kind of anniversary show would this be if you won? I mean, that would be jumping the shark. That would be jumping the shark. And we've done this for 50 shows. We want to do it for 50 more. We can't run everybody off right now.
No, not yet.
So, all right, guys, that'll do it. 50 episodes, 1 year. Guys, some would say we're professionals at this now. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd say we're in the G League.
I was going to say, and yet again tonight, me and Elrod don't agree because we suck. If we were professionals at this, we'd get paid to do this. And there's nothing more in my life I would love more than for this to be my full-time job. But considering I make money on my full-time job and we lose money on this show, but it's a labor of love, we're a little bit far away from being professionals. But no, guys, this has been fun. Thanks for tuning in to this show. Thanks for tuning in to however many of the first 50 you caught. We hope you stick around with us for the next 50. And before you can watch the next 50, you got to watch the next one. The next one coming up next week, episode 51 will be the show. We told you it was going to be episode 49 till Elrod had to bail. We're going to do it next week. The live concert lineup build Mount Rushmore type draft show. I just gave that a really, really long name. The actual title on the episode will not be that long. It'll be more succinct. But we got that coming up for you next week. Bennett versus Elrod try to impress me with their concert lineups. We hope we impressed you with this show. We hope we impressed you with the first 50 episodes. We know we impressed 10,000 people at least with that Mike Tyson Muhammad Ali episode. Guys, let's get this one to 10,000. Let's get all of them to 10,000. Let's make so many people watch this that YouTube will say, hey, here's some money. Because that's what we would like for them to do. We're not close to that. But maybe in another 50, we still won't be there, but we'll be a little bit closer than that. We'll see. But thank you guys for joining us tonight. Thank you guys for joining us in this year. Keep joining us. We'll see you next week. Until then, for Mr. Bennett, for Mr. Elrod, I'm Andy Rutherford. Peace.